Chapter 10. The Journey Starts. For 10 long years since his awakening, Evan had delved into the depths of his abilities, exploring the strange new sense that had begun to emerge within him. A sensitivity not just to thought or memory, but to something far more elusive: connection. Over time, he learned to perceive the invisible threads binding him to others, fragile at first, like strands of light shimmering just beyond the edge of awareness. These threads, he discovered, were not constrained by the daily reset. Even when his friends awoke each morning with no memory of the previous day, the resonance of their shared moments remained. The emotional imprint lingered like echoes in a chamber untouched by time. But progress came at a cost. One of Evan's deepest fears was that, in his experimentation, he might accidentally trigger the awful flood of memory, the full awareness of the trillions upon trillions of repeated days within his friends. He had endured that horror alone, and he could not bear the thought of Sonia, Daniel, or Tina being crushed beneath that same existential weight. Yet it was they who convinced him otherwise. Again and again, each time, as if for the first, they listened, they questioned, and slowly they began to believe. Though the loop erased their memories, something deeper endured. A flicker of understanding, a sense of déjà vu, a momentary pause after a word or a glance. And eventually they said the words Evan feared and longed to hear.
If there's a chance to break this, we'll face it together.
They were willing to risk their sanity for him. In that first years, Evan proceeded with caution. He took baby steps, testing the boundaries of his emerging gift. He learned that the connections were not merely conceptual, they responded to his emotional state. When he was fully present, when he held his friends in his heart not as simulations but as souls, the threads shimmered more brightly. The combination of love, vulnerability, and focused intent seemed to unlock something, an emotional resonance that transcended the sterile logic of code. At first, the threads flowed only one way, from him to them. But as time passed, he began to see something extraordinary, connections forming between his friends as well. Conversations between Daniel and Tina, casual as they might seem, would spark pulses of light, subtle at first, then growing stronger. Sonia's sharp wit began to soften, revealing flickers of compassion and curiosity that had never been part of her original programming. The network of threads was no longer just a web he cast, it was becoming an ecosystem of its own. Over time, Evan began to notice a spark growing within his friends. Even if they weren't fully aware of it themselves, he could tell they were no longer just soulless replicas of their original neural patterns. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, revealed in the way they exchanged glances. Sometimes within those fleeting looks there was something genuine: curiosity, confusion, even love. What surprised him most was Sonia. The way she looked at him now was different, something he had never seen before. Sonia had always been a passionate person, and the simulation seemed to have replicated that trait convincingly. But now, Evan could tell the difference. For the first time, she wasn't just imitating passion, she felt it, and she was looking at him with something real. By the second year, Evan began to act with greater purpose. He experimented with emotional triggers, shared memories, long-forgotten jokes, the kind of intimate knowledge that only close friends carry. He discovered that emotional honesty, combined with deep personal context, could accelerate the growth of the threads. The more he revealed of himself, his fears, his hopes, his pain, the more the connections flourished. And it wasn't just about him anymore. Sometimes the most profound growth came not through his own interactions, but through the moments his friends shared with each other. A quiet conversation between Sonia and Daniel, a spontaneous duet between Tina and an old piano. Evan realized that this was not a hierarchy of awakening, but a network, each member reinforcing the others. He was not their savior, he was their catalyst. By the end of the second year, the change was undeniable. The dead perfection of the loop had given way to something messy, unpredictable, alive. Their emotions, once hollow facsimiles, now surged with authenticity. Joy, fear, jealousy, vulnerability, even arguments. For the first time, they confessed uncertainties. For the first time, they cried. Life, real life, was getting closer. And yet, the loop remained. Each day still reset, each memory still vanished. But something lingered, a tension beneath the surface, a sense that nothing was quite as it had been. Evan no longer needed to convince them of the truth, they were already halfway there. The threads had become a map of their progress, glowing faintly even when the day began anew. But no matter how close they came, full awakening remained just out of reach. Evan was torn. Part of him wanted to shatter the illusion entirely, to rip the veil from their eyes and set them free. But another part understood the curse of the loop, the strange grace it offered. Within its confines he had been able to test, to learn, to stumble without consequence. The loop had given them a space to evolve safely, to fail forward. And now, at last, the network had grown as far as it could within the bounds of their small circle. It was Sonia-logical, skeptical, fiercely loyal Sonia who first suggested what Evan had been afraid to consider.
You've reached us.
She said once, in one of those rare moments when the thread between them pulsed like a real heartbeat.
But there's more out there. Others. You need to find them.
Daniel agreed.
We're part of something bigger. We feel it, even if we forget it each day.
Tina smiled, her eyes warm.
Go, explore. We'll be here when you come back.
It wasn't the first time they had said these words. Across nearly 1,000 iterations they had reached this moment again and again, always arriving at the same conclusion: Evan had to go beyond. And every time their conviction gave him strength. They believed in him fiercely, unshakably, more than he believed in himself. And so the journey began.